Hello, Ram fam. It's your girl, Scheel-Gaytan here, Director of Training with the Allen Ram team. And today's episode is something special. I've got a couple of guys on here. We've got Michael Renaud, our CEO and fearless leader here at the Ram family. But today we also have a very special guest. His name is Tom Kline. He is the founder of Better Vantage Point. You're going to hear from him in a second. Today's episode is called Cover Your Assets. Because, listen, if there is an industry in this country that needs to mitigate risk, it's our business. We know that. So hello, Tom.
Hello, Susan. Great to be here.
Welcome.
Thank you.
A little bit about Tom. Tom is the founder of Better Vantage Point. I know your family's been in the risk mitigation business for quite a while, so I'd love for you to give us a little background on that. But I know you travel around and you're in the dealerships constantly. You're always looking for that edge for dealerships to make sure that they stay safe and cover their assets. So tell us a little bit about your company, and then we'll roll into the main content, what we've got to talk
But
about.
first, a word from our sponsor, right, Michael?
Oh, we do have a sponsor today. This fired up. Are you fired up? Because this fired up episode is brought to you by Management by Fire, the most impactful in-person training event coming your way April 20th to 21st at the Pinnacle Training Center in Atlanta, Georgia. Be there or be square. Send your good managers. We promise them we'll make them great. Now back to Fired Up.
Okay.
Thank you, Tom.
Yes.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you to our sponsor.
Got to make sure you get those sponsor plugs in there.
It's important. They pay for this whole thing.
That's right. And I'm just going to add to one thing that Michael said. Even if you don't have good managers, even if you have average managers, you should send them to Management by Fire anyway. So is that not right, Michael?
100%.
100%.
And not just, and in all seriousness, not just good managers, poor managers, the future managers. Right, Tom? How many times do you go into dealerships and you start talking to managers, and the guy, he's like, oh, how long have you been a manager for? Oh, 2 months. Oh, what are they doing to teach you to protect the dealership? Oh, I don't know. I was just the number one salesperson. And now how are we building for our future, and what are we teaching our future?
Correct.
Yeah.
That gives a good quick segue to a good story, which is how I became the collection manager. And I became the collection manager when I was at the store because the former one got fired for doing drugs. And so I got anointed to be the collection manager. I said, well, what do you want me to do? And they said, I don't know, go figure it out. Go collect something. I said, okay.
Did they make you take a drug test first?
No. Didn't take a drug test first.
They didn't learn their lesson, huh?
That's great.
But Susan, to get back to your question, my family's been in the car business since 1925. I'm actually a third generation car guy. And I worked at our store for just over 30 years. And we sold the stores in 2019. And so after that, that's when I opened my consulting business. So it's in my blood, it's in my DNA. It's what I do. So
30 years. And this is in Virginia, in the state of Virginia?
Virginia, correct.
All right.
Correct.
Very
Yes.
Cool. You definitely know what you're talking about. And the fact that you actually worked in the dealership, allows you to connect more. You know what our front line guys are going through every day, right? So
That's right.
Awesome. Give us the juice. The first thing that we want to talk about here, we're going to talk about three important things that will help you at the dealership today. But the first thing is something that we do every single day. It's a resource. It's a tool that we frankly cannot live without today, and that's texting. Texting has become such a great tool to use for us when we're dealing with customers and prospects, but we also know that there's another side to texting and those privacy and compliance rules. So tell us a little bit about that and what we need to know when it comes to texting.
Sure. So the telephone, Consumer Protection Act, or TCPA, is what governs texting. And I've been told by many different lawyers over the years, it's very tricky and almost impossible to comply with. So what that means is that you're supposed to get, quote, prior written consent before you text any customers. Now, prior written consent isn't a text message because it's not written consent. So that's why there's many reasons why, and I'm not an attorney, I'm a business consultant, but I can tell you it's very difficult to comply with. So if you are texting with customers, the easiest way, I think, to make sure that you're doing the best thing you can for the dealership is to ask the customer, just text them and say, is it okay if I text you? Mm-hmm. And if they say no, respect it. If they say, stop texting me, respect it. Okay, if you go over the line, then expect pushback. And the fines are between $500 and $1,500 per text. Whew. So this is really nothing to mess with. When dealerships want to do mass texts to their customer base and they ask me, I say, don't do it.
Right.
It's too hard to comply with the prior written consent. And the biggest problem here is there's two problems actually. There's class action exposure, and what a class action means that two customers or potential customers or whatever get together and decide that they don't like what you did, so they band together and then they file a lawsuit on behalf of a whole class. And that class could be anyone that anybody from the dealership has texted within a certain number of years. And so when you start doing the math, how many ups are there? Michael, Susan, you tell me how many ups are in a typical single location in a month. Give me a range.
Gosh, it could be 500 to 1,000.
Okay, so let's take 700 and 750 times 1,500. That's what is that? 750,000 ish.
Wow.
I mean, it's the numbers are huge.
So Tom, let me ask you, what does it mean when I have, because I see it all the time. I used it in dealerships I ran. I see it all the time when I go to dealerships now. When the CRMs have disclaimers that go out. When I text through a CRM, they automatically ask that question, correct?
That does happen, but again, it goes back to, do you have prior written consent? And as an example, let's say that let's say the lead comes from a third-party site. If the lead comes from a third-party site and they don't have specific prior written consent to be able to text in a certain with a certain legal language there, then right. You don't have that's not transferable.
So the disclaimer. So when I send that disclaimer saying, hey, is it okay to text you? And they write back yes.
Then you're okay if you've got
okay. So that so if the CRM sends out a notice, please write Y to accept this text and to not accept that text, that covers them the same way.
I don't know. Again, we're talking about a very technical law, and I don't know that complies as written. It's because it's a text.
Right.
And so because there has to be prior express written consent, I don't think that does it. So I guess my answer would be a kind of a qualified one, which is depends on the CRM, depends on whether it goes out as an email or text. If it goes out an email and there's the proper lawyer language there that you can text them, then I think it's okay. But a little common sense here, right? If a customer is texting you as the salesman, I think it's okay to respond back, right? That's common sense. But as far as salesman A gets fired, you inherit all their leads, right? The next day so there's no orphans. And the next, so then if you're an ambitious sales guy and you're going through those orphan leads, I wouldn't start by texting.
Mhm.
I just don't think that's the right way to go. I think you can email and say, hey, I saw you were, talking to Johnny, and Johnny's no longer with the company, but I've been here for years and I'd love to help you. And, is it okay if would you prefer email or text or a phone call, right? I always give the customer a choice. That's super important. Say, what is your preferred method of communication? I want to be respectful. I want to honor your wishes. I'd like to get you the information you want. I can send you a video on the car. It's still here. I can, et cetera, do walk around videos, that kind of thing. But ask their permission and ask how they want to be contacted. If they say they don't want to be contacted, don't contact them. Because what happens, anybody who's going to sue the dealership over a TCPA is somebody that a salesman is going to piss off, right? And because they piss them off, they're then going to go to a lawyer and say they won't stop calling me, they won't stop texting me, they won't. Again, a little common sense here, I think, goes a long way. Important to be aggressive when you're in sales, but be smart. Does that answer your question?
I just have one quick question just to clarify, because you're saying it has to be written. So, I know we've got a lot of reps that will be on the phone with a client and may ask, hey, I've got your cell phone number. Can I text you? Is that enough to be compliant?
I think that you're asking a technical question, and I'm not a lawyer, but I think the answer is no, because it's not prior express written consent, and that's what's in the language. Do I think that customer is going to be a problem? No, because you asked them and say,
right,
is it okay? So the answer is it's probably a violation of the TCPA, but are you going to get tagged for it? Probably not, because the customer said it's okay. So it's a slippery slope.
And it's a case by case, but what you're saying ultimately is, and I know that these laws also vary by state. So what you're saying is your best bet is just to make sure that before you do that, you get written consent from the client, either through a text or through an email.
I'd be happier with email because it's prior express written consent, because those are the 4 words that are in the statute. But I think you really have to be careful here, and you really have to be mindful to be sensitive to the customer, so that it doesn't become a lawsuit and it doesn't become a claim. And then from the dealer's side, just real quickly on this issue, you should check your garage liability insurance to see if you're covered for violations of the TCPA. So in many garage
GMs and owners, let's listen here.
That's right. And in many garage packages, it's excluded. There is no coverage if there's a violation. So the owners, when they're making choices about whether to let salesmen text or not, they should know their backside, right? They should know whether they have a backstop and can make a claim on their insurance policy if they do get a claim from a customer who says the TCPA was violated.
Excellent.
Very good stuff. Good stuff. Okay, let's move on to used cars. We are actually having a used car month here with the Ram Fam, everything used cars. We're seeing, obviously, used car values fluctuate. Prices are dropping right now. But one thing that we're seeing a lot more of are acquisitions at the dealerships. Dealers are finally getting on trend with acquiring more trades, more used cars at the dealership through their sales efforts. But, we're also seeing that dealerships are adding acquisition processes without much care. Right? They know they need to buy cars. They know they need to buy cars through their sales efforts. But, it might be a little bit of a mess right now. So what do we need to know to stay safe when it comes to buying used cars and DNV?
Yes. So there's really, I'm going to start with 2 main silos. I got a phone call, and this is not unusual, unfortunately. I got a phone call from a dealership in Texas 2 weeks ago, and they were defrauded by a group of criminals, and they bought 3 vehicles from 3 different individuals for a total of about $140,000, $150,000. And they were wiring the monies to the individuals before they had the vehicle and before they had a title. So they were out, and they said, what can we do? We've contacted the FBI, we've contacted the police. What else can we do? I said, send me your insurance policy. Let me take a look at it. And in that particular case, this dealership had purchased the least expensive insurance policy I've ever seen in my many years. And it didn't have what's called trick and device coverage. And that is, if you get tricked out of a vehicle, then the insurance company will pay. Well, in this case, the dealership is out 150 grand, because unless they can, hire a private investigator, they can't go to their insurance company, and they're just out the money. So lesson number 1 is, if you are paying a customer for their equity, it's my opinion from a risk perspective that until you get the title in the dealership's name, they don't get a check. So you can make the payoff. If there's a payoff, you make the payoff, you get the title, you take the title, you turn the title into the dealership's name, then they get their difference check.
Waiting for the DMV. So you pay them. I get it. You pay them the payoff, and then the rest you'll pay off when the title clears.
Correct. And if it's a cash deal, same thing. You can send your lot porter down to the DMV with them. As soon as he's got the title into the dealership's name, he hands them a check. It's done right there. So that's the number 1 thing to make sure that you do to protect yourself, is
have the title and make sure that you are getting the proper signatures at the time of the purchase.
But before you, I'll get to that in 1 second. Before you give the customer their check, the title should be in the dealership's name. Otherwise, there's no way to prevent you from being defrauded. It's just, you can't do it. So the bank is going to send you the title. I mean, you're not going to have a problem with the bank most times, unless it's a case where they were never provided the title. And I've seen that a lot of times. The bank was never provided the title, so therefore they can't send it to the dealership, and so you get that whole scenario.
And you're chasing down a title, right?
Chasing down a title, and that's never pleasant. The second thing is, while we have usually great documentation when somebody buys a car from the dealership, it's rare for a dealer to have specific dealership paperwork when you're when you're buying their car. So you should have buyer specific paperwork to protect you in case of all things. And we don't have time today to go into some of those, but there should be a separate set of paperwork. You shouldn't do that on a buyer's order, because you're not selling them a car, you're buying their car. It's 2 totally different things. And then the third thing, I said there were 2, there's really 3. The third thing is, check your garage insurance policy, PS owners and dealers. This is where you come in, to make sure that you have what's called trick, TRICK, as in trick or treat, although this isn't a treat, trick or device coverage, DEVICE is what it's called. And that's where, if you are out of vehicles, that's where the coverage is. Now, this afternoon, I was on a Zoom call with a client. There was only $100,000 of, it's also called false pretense coverage, by the way. There was only $100,000 of false pretense coverage. And this is a CDJR store. And now a Grand Wagoneer is $100 grand. Oof. Right. And so right. If you've got one vehicle can blow right through the false pretense limits very quickly.
Wow, this is good stuff. Okay, so Number one, make sure that you get your title first. Number two, make sure that if you do have an acquisitions team or process, that you've got buyer specific paperwork ready to go. And then the third thing, if you are an owner, dealer principal, make sure that you've got your trick or device insurance in your garage insurance.
Correct.
Okay.
Sometimes,
Awesome.
sometimes it's on the physical damage and not in the garage. So it's often on what's called the dealer's automotive physical damage insurance or open lot coverage. It's not necessarily in the garage. So I missed.
And don't go cheap. Don't go cheap either, because if you're in the, you know, and I guess that would depend also on the dealership and their area and their market and, you know, whatnot.
Right. But sometimes, listen, sometimes the answer is just so flippant. Let's just
Right.
the cheapest, whatever it is, the cheapest. And
Mhm.
no one looks at the limits inside of it,
Right.
right? There's getting the cheapest, and then there's also getting the cheapest and making sure your limits at least match what's on your lot.
And I
Mhm.
was on in the Zoom call I was on earlier today. I identified on the dealer's quotes 38 items that we went over to say this limit's too low, this limit's too high.
Right.
We can change
Right.
here, we can change
You don't
there.
have to get, you don't, and Tom, tell me if I'm wrong. You don't have to get the platinum insurance policy. But the most important thing when you're doing insurance and looking at insurance from a dealership perspective is, are my limits right? And am I covered for my neighborhood?
That's
right?
a good way to say it. I mean,
Mhm.
you don't need the platinum, but you don't need, you don't need the cheapest either.
Right.
So
Listen, if I live in an area that has a lot of identity theft, I'll make sure that I have a lot more coverage for identity theft. If I live in an, or if I might live, my dealership's in an area where the guys are robbing cars off my lot more often, then I'm going to have more coverage for that, or whatever it is. Like, be self-aware of what you need, but the limits are, you got to look at your inventory and look at your limits. That's one thing I learned a long time ago.
gotta look at those limits. You can't just do whatever the last cheapest quote is that they throw on your desk. That's not the one to get.
Mhm. That could end up being more expensive.
It will
For you,
end up
in the end.
Give you the
Such
phone.
good stuff.
I'll
Yes.
give you the phone number of the bealer in Texas, and you can call him and ask him how he's feeling right now.
All right. So great pointer so far. We're going to end with a message for dealership managers. If you are a sales manager, GSM, GM, maybe you someday want to progress to be a manager. What sort of risk trends, Tom, are you seeing out there on the field? What are you, what tips, what advice could you give dealership managers right now to stay away from risk, to stay safe?
I think the most, I'm going to split this into two pieces too. I think the most important thing to help your owner is, and help them cover their assets, is to have a compliance program. If you don't have a compliance program, you should start one. And you should ask your owner, hey, I need to start. We don't have any compliance here. There's no compliance training. There should be compliance training on a monthly basis at least, and have employees sign off so that everybody is getting a little training every month. And as a part of that, I'm going to say item number 2 is the new safeguard regulations, which go into effect on June the 9th of this year. There's a lot of dealers who haven't started their work on this, and it is a complicated and complex set of rules and regulations that dealers have to comply with. And it's all surrounding data security and securing customer personally identifiable information, or PII. So these new regulations came into effect because everybody was having a data breach. You know, I've gotten multiple letters over the last couple of years from various companies because my information gets leaked out and so forth. So the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, responded by changing the regulations, or I should say updating is a better word, because these regulations have been around since May of 2003, and dealerships were to have been complying all along, of which a lot of them have not been. But the new regulations go into effect June 9th. I understand from somebody who is an insider that there is going to be immediate and increased enforcement on this issue starting on June the 10th. I don't work for the FTC, so I can't tell you that for a fact.
How do they enforce it? How, like, what? So just help people understand. Like, first question, do I need someone like a Tom Kline to help me with this process?
Well, everybody needs a Tom Kline to help with this process, but
yeah. But if it is like, can I do this by myself, or am I going to get, you know what, by Uncle Sam if I do this myself?
If you're a diligent guy, you absolutely can do it by yourself, but you have to really be diligent. And you know, you have to have all these written protocols. You have to have an information security program. You have to have a data breach response program. It has to all be written. You have to have a written business communication program of what you're going to tell your employees and the public in case you have a data breach. All these various things. Absolutely, you can do it yourself, but you're going to have to spend some time and some energy to do it.
It's much easier to have a guy like you do it for me.
Right on.
Yeah. And Tom, you know, I know with the dealership that I was with for a couple of decades, we were part of a group and had a safeguard company come in to address issues for the group. But what they did for the individual stores was assign safety officers. And so, for example, I was a compliance officer. One of, you know, I know GSMs often get this role, right? Handed down to them. But would it be smart to assign someone at the dealership if you are an owner, for example, you know, you're not there all the time?
You know, I talk to dealers all the time, and whether you have 10 locations, 17 locations, or 28 locations, and I've asked this question to dealers of those size groups, and I say, there's one way for me to tell if they're doing compliance at all, and that is, they say, well, we have a compliance program. I say, oh, okay, I'm gonna only have one question. Do you have a compliance clerk or somebody performing compliance activities at that location? And if they say no, then they don't have a compliance.
Right.
It's really pretty simple.
Now, wait, to help people, does that person have to be like, do I have to pay someone, you know, I don't know, whatever, $50,000, $80,000, or can I say, listen, I have a finance director in the store. I have a #1 finance manager. And the reason why I look to finance managers is because they get more compliance training than anyone in the dealership, right? So they understand the concept and the importance of it. So do I say, hey, you're my #1 F&I guy, you're my new compliance officer? Can it be that easy? Or you're the controller for the store, here you go. Bless you.
And here's what I want you to do: 2 hours a week of compliance activities. And here's what I want. It doesn't have to, somebody doesn't have to be,
and I'll give you a couple extra $100 a week to cover it.
Correct.
Perfect.
As long as you're doing
right. When dealers know they can boil things down to that, right? Now the responsibility on the owner or the GM is to hold that compliance person accountable.
Right.
That's why I'm going to give you the couple like $100 so I can hold you accountable. I think if they know that, understanding and communicating with someone like you becomes just so much better for a dealership.
You know what? And the communication is the key there, because I know, you know, with me, listen, I didn't go to school for compliance or anything. I don't know what Tom knows. But I was a leader in the dealership, and I was expected to communicate, you know, all of these new safeguards and things that needed to be communicated to the team and alerted to the team. So I think a lot of it is just that is being the liaison, so to speak, for the team.
Yep. The journey, you know, the old proverb, the journey of 1,000 steps is taking the first step. I'm butchering it, but you know, you got to start. You know, that's how do you start a compliance program? You look at one item, and all of a sudden you have a compliance program. And then the next month you look at another item, but you make sure the first item is straight. And then the third month you look at the first and the second item. That's how you do it. And for anybody else to say, well, we're going to come in and we're going to do it all, it'll never stick, because nobody will ever comply with all this stuff, because you're giving them too much information and too much stuff to comply with all at once. It's got to be phased in, and there has to be a culture of compliance. And I don't love using that word, but everybody's got to understand, if you don't get in line, you're not going to be here. It can be said a lot more positively, and you can use carrots instead of sticks, right?
But the reality is, how much of a carrot or a stick do I have to give you to say, if you don't protect the place of business, you're not going to have a paycheck next payroll because the business doesn't exist. Like, you know, everyone in a dealership has to get on that page and understand that, you know, this whole thing is symbiotic. And
Absolutely.
the dealer, as long as our employer is healthy, we're healthy.
Right.
If our employer
You know,
is sick, we're sick. We're not getting paid.
It's true.
Right. And people need to remember that. I feel like somehow we've lost that a little bit, and people need to be brought in and remember, like, the dealership that you work for needs to be healthy.
It's true.
To make a healthy paycheck.
It's a true partnership.
It's true, Michael, but some dealers are reluctant to use that hammer, and they want to do it by using a carrot, which is perfectly fine. However, whatever your style is and whatever you're comfortable with is okay. Totally agree with what you said, but that's not how all dealers want to do it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, but that notion needs to exist with all of us in this industry and in any business. If whoever you work for, whoever's supplying your paycheck, like, you know, that's you know, keeping the business healthy is how you show your appreciation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, we're running out of time. We could go another hour. You know, this might not be the coolest, the funnest, the raddest topic, but
oh, come on.
You know, listen, with Tom,
hey, Tom's a cool guy.
Tom, listen, if anyone makes it fun, it's you. I mean, I've heard you like to have fun. I heard about your wedding.
Yes,
in Vegas.
that's right.
So
Elvis.
now, where can we find you? If someone is listening and says, listen, I need to get to step one. I need to just have a conversation with Tom to get the ball rolling. Where can they find you?
I'm everywhere. Just look for me. No, so my website is bettervantagepoint.com. And my phone number is 757-434-7656. So you can text me or call me, or you can email me. And that is Tom K, as in Tom Kline, Tom K at bettervantagepoint.com. You can also find me through my YouTube channel, which is under Better Vantage Point. And I'm sure there are other ways. Smoke signals, Chinese balloons flying over the United States might drop, you know, messages to me. However you want to get to me, I'm pretty easy to find.
Thank you. And we'll also include links on our webpage as well, so that we can make sure that you can find him through us. You know, listen, compliance is a lot like training. It's not a one and done. You don't just do it once and it's over with, job's done. This is a constant. This is something that you need as we modernize the business and make changes. This is something that we cannot forget about. So
Absolutely.
Thanks again for joining us today. Hopefully we get to meet with you again and get some more tips from you to stay on top of risk. Michael, can you let us know what's going on with the RAM team? What do we have to look forward to? Any events and news coming up?
We have some amazing stuff. Well, we have to acknowledge our sponsor, Management by Fire, April 20th and 21st at the Pinnacle Training Center, managementbyfire.com for all your tickets and information. And I also have something really exciting as well. So for the first time in several years, our Adapt VT, our online platform, is going to go through a major upgrade and transformation launching April 10th. An entire new platform, an entire new way to learning courses, live courses within the platform, the ability for dealers to customize learning paths for their teams. It is going to be just a complete interactive new way of educating and teaching, and we're so excited for it. And the other thing I have a big announcement about, Susan's been undercovers, hiding from all of us, working really hard on revamping Alan's core foundational program, Phone Ups That Show Up. Our Phone Ups That Show Up had launched in the new platform, launched in January, and the program carries us through right now, where the final piece is coming together for April. So Phone Ups That Show Up, a brand new Alan's core. Susan takes you on a modernized journey, and our new platform coming around the corner. And don't forget Management by Fire. They paid a lot for this endorsement.
Woohoo!
Back to you, Susan.
I love it.
Oh, one last piece to our independent dealers. National Independent Dealers Association conference in June. We will be there. We can't wait to see you. And we're going to have some pretty amazing special promotions designed just for our independent clients.
And
Yeah,
I will
heard
be
about
there
this.
as well.
Yes,
Nice.
Tom will be there as well with us. That's right.
Yeah,
I
that's
hear
right.
there's a hot deal that you're putting together for dealers who want training.
There is. We're going to have a pretty awesome.
I was pretty shocked when I
program.
saw those prices. It looks like you're literally slashing
Well,
prices
they
on
need
our
the help.
subscription. So
Listen, independent dealers need as much help as the OEM dealers, and you know, they maybe even more with how tight their inventory is going to start getting soon.
wonderful. Can't wait. Can't wait to see you there, Tom.
We'll see you
Thank
then.
you, gentlemen.
See you there.
Thank you.
Until next time, have a wonderful week. Bye,
Stay
everybody.
fired up.
Goodbye, Ram fam.